Hello, Internet, and welcome to Experimental Cataclysm, the show where we talk about recent changes to the experimental version of Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead. It's probably a pretty light show this week, which works for my schedule, so we're just going to get started here. First up today, I wanted to talk about a bug. Now, we had random pieces of the God co-location slash church retreat slash whatever it's called, and this would be spawning in places where it shouldn't have been spawning. This was breaking some map gen. It would overwrite other locations with palisade walls and things like that. Now, I know some people were holding off from updating the game, but the issue should be resolved at this point, so you are free to update again. And apologies for that coming in a little late. Obviously, it would have been nice if I had had a show where I could warn people that this was happening so you knew not to update, but yeah, so it's been resolved. That's the best I can offer. There you go. It looks like the PR to fix it came from WWKK222208, so just wanted to give you a shout out for fixing that. Now, there is also another bug where enemies have the word none appended to their names. Now, there was a PR to fix this on February 20th from Brett Dong, which should have fixed this issue. Although, as I write this script, someone just told me in Discord that they are still experiencing it on a build after that fix was merged. So at this time, I don't know if there's some confusion with that person, or if it's a separate issue, or if maybe it just doesn't work on existing creatures. I don't know. However, this is also not a game-breaking bug. It's just a very visible one, so I don't actually think this is a very big deal. Anyway, let's get into the updates proper. First up today from KittyTac, we've got a change to the You Think option in the chat menu. Now, we did talk about this when it was first added to the game. It's a flavor thing that allowed you to emote into the chat log. Now, it didn't have any actual impact on gameplay. It just printed a message in the log for roleplay and flavor and things like that. Now, thanks to this change from KittyTac, it's a free-form emote tool allowing you to type actions instead of just being limited to things that you want to think. Now, I mention this because one of the first major ideas that I had for YouTube videos was to make an audiobook style story that I would act out fully in Cataclysm like a machinima. And one of the things that annoyed me back then was that we had no way for the player to print a message directly to the log. Now, I eventually abandoned that project because, there were many other issues and it was a staggering amount of work to try and do that, but I also always just really wanted a way to emote directly to the log. And so now, thanks to this simple PR, we have that, which I really love. I'm super happy to see this come to the game. I know it's not a big deal. I know it's not something a lot of people will use, but I absolutely love that I can print directly to the log. Anyway, next up today from MooCowTG, we've got a simple PR that expands the search range for special locations. Now, basically, when the game would search for these special locations, it would only look so far, and if it didn't find them, then it would break and point you nowhere. So let's say you get the mission from Smokes that points you to the hub. The game would try to find the hub to generate a location for you to be able to find, and if it didn't find it, then oh no, the mission is broken and now you don't know where the hub is. Well, this PR made it so that the game will search a little bit harder for those locations, looking further out to find them. And while this might sound like a very small change, and I guess it actually is, this happened pretty frequently for a lot of people. Now, they did mention in the PR that it might cause the game to hang up briefly while it searches, but that should only be an issue for really far away locations. In other words, if the game looks for the hub and finds it near your character, obviously that would be very fast and it would just do its thing. Anyway, I wanted to mention this because I've seen this issue multiple times, and while it doesn't guarantee success, it should still help to resolve it in a lot of circumstances. Next up today from Carol, we've got some zombie balance auditing. Now, I really only mention this because one thing stood out to me. Obviously, Carol does a lot of audit stuff and I don't usually cover most of it, but in this PR they changed the skeletal line of zombies by removing their hard to shoot flag. Now, if you're not familiar, this flag made it so that the monster was considered one size smaller for determining targeting with firearms or whatever. Now, this has been a long-standing issue, with the skeletal juggernaut in particular being a questionable choice. The creature literally has juggernaut in its name, but it was harder to shoot than similar creatures. It really didn't make sense, in my opinion, for them to have this flag, and this has now been resolved. There were additionally other miscellaneous changes in this PR. There's a link in the description if you want to have a look. Next up today from Fairy Armadillo, we've got some tweaks to player guilt. Specifically, it's about the guilt that the player previously received when killing an unaware hostile NPC. Now, the guideline mentioned in this PR is very simple. If the creature is hostile, they should not cause you to become guilty for killing them. Really, regardless of their species or creature type, should have no impact on that. If something is attacking you, you should not receive a minus 100 morale penalty for killing an innocent, or whatever it's called, I don't remember. Now, in addition to fixing this, which was a bug that has now been resolved, they also reworked the way that various people will feel about killing those creatures. So Killer Drive, Spiritual, Uncaring, Pacifists, and Sapiovores all have different morale bonuses or penalties, which is different from how it was previously. However, to be honest, I'm not familiar with a lot of those and can't speak to how much has been changed. Hopefully this whole time I was showing that list on the screen for you to read. And then finally it made it so that ferals now give you a morale penalty when you butcher them. They are, after all, essentially human, and cutting apart a human is, I think the technical term is, icky. This was apparently a bug that has now been fixed. You can still fight a hostile feral without feeling guilty, but taking them apart afterwards will give you that penalty. Alright, next up today we've got a change from the glorious, God-chosen cult leader himself, Kevin. Now, this was a rework to the way bomb fragments work, and the specifics are a bit beyond me because of course they are, so I'll just be going by what's mentioned in the PR's text rather than the files. So it looks like first up, fragments weren't passing through tiles if that tile contained a monster. And while I do think creatures would absorb a lot of the fragments, having them all full stop if there's a creature there is nonsense. That little squirrel, for instance, is not going to absorb 100% of the shrapnel that moves through that tile. Grenades should now have a lot more fragments as well than, they did previously, mentioned in the PR as about 10,000, which I have absolutely no context for if that's reasonable or not. I have never counted grenade fragments in real life. The damage they deal is also lower than what it was previously. The summary line in the PR says they were returned to be, quote, less effective against ballistic armor and lose power over distance faster. So a lot of this stuff has changed, with the continued principle being that unarmored or lightly armored creatures, close to a grenade should be guaranteed to die. However, anything with armor or that's further away should be significantly less effective. Now, in terms of game balance, what does all of that mean? Well, I have no idea really. We'll have to play around with these items in the game to get a feeling for whether this all works as intended or not. Kevin does mention that they might be, quote, a little bit overboard, but it meets my goals, so we'll have to see how it all shakes out in the end. Now, regardless, the only other thing I wanted to mention here is that according to this PR, tossing a grenade at a skeletal juggernaut results in almost no damage, around roughly 5 HP, which is essentially nothing, which I kind of thought people would want to know that specifically. Anyway, moving on, next up today from Rennick, we've got a change that affects faction camp food stores, making it so that the camp now tracks and consumes vitamins. Now, the PR made it so that 1, vitamins are tracked when food is deposited, 2, removes those vitamins as the food is consumed, and applies only, quote, when the NPC eats from the larder by being near it, and does not apply to calorie consumption that vanishes from stores when the NPC is assigned to do work. Now, the main concern here would be with toxins, which are treated as vitamins by the game, and that's the negative stuff in mutant meat. If you deposit mutant meat into the camp, then NPCs will consume that meat along with those toxins. And because vitamins are pulled out proportionally based on stored calories, this means that a little mutant meat in a huge pile of food will cause barely any toxins to be given to your NPCs. However, by contrast, if you have a lot of mutant meat and a relatively small pile of other food, then they will pull quite a lot of toxins each time they consume those calories out of that store. Now, essentially, this means that you can still use mutant meat if you have a significant amount of regular food to sort of water down their impact. However, that said, I would not recommend dumping your mutant foods into the camp stores, and especially not the high toxin foods like the mutant fat products. And if you've already been doing this, well, it shouldn't matter until you update and this change merges with the game. time. Everything prior to now, obviously they would not have been tracking those vitamins, so it won't have an impact if you already dumped tens of thousands of calories of mutant food. Now this also applies for other vitamins as well. In the comments, the example used was like, well, what if I need more vitamin C, but I have lots of calories in the storage? Then only a tiny bit of vitamin C would be distributed each time a character pulled from those calorie stores, which is a very confusing sentence. Hopefully that made sense, but it is true. If you don't have enough of a vitamin and you have a huge pile of food, it's very watered down. However, it was pointed out that you can still manually distribute food if you want to, meaning you could directly give your NPCs food that is high in vitamin C to counteract that issue. Now I'm sure there are aspects of this that I didn't take note of because I'm not a big faction camp guy. I really like them, I just almost never get around to using them, and I don't really have much more to say about this, although I did ask Rennick about the NPC penalties. Basically, I asked if the tremors or seizures would prevent you from sending your NPCs to work if you gave them too much mutant meat, and they basically said no, it's currently, quote, the gentlest possible penalties right now. So ultimately, while I think this will annoy some people, I do like the change, and with the ability to manually distribute food, you can still address vitamin deficiencies with multivitamins or whatever if you would need to. So yeah, vitamin tracking for faction camps, huzzah, I don't know, I like this change. And then finally today from A Nickel N, we've got the addition of weapon mods spawning on firearms dropped by soldiers. Actually, specifically, this is on their rifles, and it's specifically slings, foregrips, and optics. Now, I don't really have much to say about this PR, except that I really do like the idea of us having gun mods spawn on weapons. And we've talked about this several times over the years. There are, especially on the civilian side, there are a lot of people who modify their firearms. However, in the game, almost every handgun and rifle will spawn with basically no attachments or maybe a sling. Now, on the military side, it's the same thing. Optics, for example, are pretty common, but our military rifles previously spawned with essentially no attachment except for slings. And every now and then you would find a really modified firearm, but it was like a specific one, right? We used to have, what was it, the Barrett always was a +4 attachment because it came with the same 4 mods every single time. Now anyway, I would like to see this continue being expanded is my point here, for civilian weapons as well, not just military. Now I was going to read off the spawn percentages for all of these things because there's a list in the PR, but I'm just going to show it on the screen for you to look at. I have no real thoughts here. I'm not in the military and have no idea how common these things are for your average soldier. I'm just happy to see more mods spawning, like full stop. That's all I like that about this. Now there was discussion in the comments about wanting to do more like this in the future and some discussion about suppressors in particular, but I lack the knowledge to really have an opinion there. There's a link to the PR in the description down below if you do want to read through the comments. And with that, I actually think this show draws to a close. Based on the script length, this might be like a 10-minute video. I really just didn't see much this time to talk about. So, and then personally, I had some like really bad things happen this week and I'm super behind schedule. So being 10 minutes long is probably really going to help me out. Now, regardless, everyone, thank you for watching. Sorry there's not more, I guess. I'll be back in a few weeks with another episode and I'll see you next time.